This week on the College Football Roundup, the playoffs kick off, Dilly picks the Sun Devils, Texas fires a coach, and so much more. This is the Monday Report, starting now! Alright, hello ladies and gentlemen, it is Monday, December 22nd, 2025. And this is the Monday Report. I'm your host, H. James K., and today we've got a packed show for you. We are going to go over the four first games of the college football playoff. We're going to talk about some of the stats and the scores and what I thought of all four games. Then we're going to have a bit of a discussion about the format of the college football playoff. Then, from there, we're going to move on to some coaching news in the Big 12 and the SEC before we wrap it up with some quick hits and get out of here. All right, first off, to kick off the college football playoff this year, Alabama went to Norman, Oklahoma to take on the Oklahoma Sooners. Alabama ended up triumphing 34-24. Ty Simpson finished the game 18 of 29 for 232 yards, 2 touchdowns, with 6 carries for negative 22 rushing yards. So I thought Ty Simpson was solid in this game, though I didn't think he was like, wow, what a performance. You know, it was aight. You know, it was a solid performance, but it wasn't anything, Heisman worthy or anything like that. He didn't make any big mistakes. He didn't throw a pick. That's the important part. And he was able to lead his team from a pretty sizable deficit after getting off to a slow start. By contrast, Oklahoma quarterback John Mateer finished the day 26 of 41 for 307 yards, 2 passing touchdowns and 1 interception. He also had 19 carries for 15 yards rushing. The biggest mistake John Mateer made was that interception. He threw a 50-yard pick six that completely turned the momentum in the second quarter. You know, Bama goes down 17-0 to the Sooners early, and it looks like Oklahoma is just going to run away with it. They're doing anything they want, and their defense is everywhere, and it's like, wow, this is a butt whooping. And then Bama got a field goal. All right, it's 17-3, and then John Mateer threw a pick six, and then it's 17-10, and from there, after going down 17-0, Bama outscored Oklahoma 34-7 from then on, and the same issues that have been plaguing Oklahoma's offense all year reared their head. They couldn't run the ball with any consistency. Neither team could, to be honest with you. John Mateer was very inconsistent. He was really hot in the beginning, and then he was just kind of in the middle, and he was up and down. He couldn't get the rushing game going, the QB run game going, and for Bama, this looked like a team that just wanted it more. They looked like a team that had been there before, that had experienced the pressures of the playoffs and knew how to overcome a deficit. It is worth mentioning that the two biggest the two biggest comebacks in the history of the Division I college football playoff have happened against Oklahoma. Clemson had a massive one back in 2019 or whatever. 2019, 2018, 2020, somewhere in there. Had an absolutely massive one. And then obviously Bama on Friday night. I predicted that Bama would win, so I wasn't at all surprised with the result. I was more surprised with how it started. I ended up going to the movies during this game. Plans had been made weeks in advance. So there I am with a headphone in my right ear, streaming the game on my phone so I can kind of keep track of it while also watching White Christmas on the movie theater screen. I did the same thing last year with FM radio and the Lions game, but that's beside the point. Either way, this game was interesting because I'm just kind of glancing at it as I'm watching the movie, and it's like, oh, Oklahoma's like really going to do this, and then it just kind of stopped being that way, and from then on it was all Alabama. But good win for Bama. Kalen DeBoer is staying at Alabama. We kind of knew that, so he kind of put that whole thing to bed with this win, this kind of emphatic finish to this game. Then on Saturday we had the rest of the first round of the college football playoff. So the Miami Hurricanes went to Texas A&M and took on the Aggies. And I think it was the best game of the playoffs. There are those who are going to say it was boring. It was bleh. There wasn't a lot of scoring. But if you're someone who can appreciate good defense, Miami's 10-3 win over the Aggies was one of the best playoff games I've ever seen. Because I love a defensive struggle where there are turnovers, but there aren't a lot of penalties. Where it isn't that it's sloppy, where they're all making mental errors and there's, constantly breaking momentum. It's like the moments where the offenses were working were like, oh, man, they're really doing something on this one, So I just really enjoyed this game. So Miami won 10-3. It was very windy. So windy, in fact, that Miami missed 3 field goals from like 41, 47, and like 38 or something like that. And they were all wide. Just wind caught them and they were gone. It also made passing difficult. Carson Beck finished the day 14 of 20 for 103 yards and a touchdown. Marcel Reed, by comparison, that's Texas A&M's QB, sorry. He finished 25 of 39 for 237 yards with 2 interceptions. He also led his team in rushing with 15 carries for only 27 yards. So the QBs really struggled. And Reed, for his part, because he's a running quarterback, the fact that Miami's defense could keep him in the pocket and keep him contained, forcing him to be a pocket passer, he couldn't do it. He threw 2 interceptions, and neither of them was that fluky. They were just interceptions. And he made bad decisions a lot, and the Texas A&M offense had no rhythm. This game was 3-0 for a long time, like well into the fourth quarter, before the Aggies finally kicked a field goal to tie it, and ultimately with Miami scoring a touchdown late to put the game out of reach. So, in my mind, the big star of this game was Miami running back Mark Fletcher. Mark Fletcher had 17 carries for 172 yards with a long of 56 yards. And it was just, every time he touched the ball, he was gone. 10 yards, 15 yards, 12 yards, 8 yards, 20 yards. Like, it was just, every time he touched the ball, they got a first down. And I forgot to mention this. I'm pretty sure I forgot to mention this on my podcast episode last week. But as the game was starting out, I just knew that the team that ran the ball better was going to win this game. That I had this weird feeling that, whoever runs the ball better wins. And Miami could run the ball, and Texas A&M couldn't. What's interesting about teams with mobile quarterbacks is so often you see that teams that have a mobile quarterback cannot rely on their running backs to provide rushing output. For many teams, if the QB run is so thoroughly ingrained into the offensive philosophy that if it ain't there, it's just like the run game doesn't work. You can't. There is no other. You don't have a second pitch. You just have the fastball. So for Mark Fletcher to be able to carry it 17 times and break off a 56-yarder and have 172 yards rushing total, it was impressive as heck. And he ran with power, speed. He was decisive. And for Texas A&M, disappointing end of the season. They finally the two best teams that Texas A&M played all year. The only two teams, the two best teams, not named Notre Dame, that they played all year, they lost. Texas and Miami. Other than that, they just didn't play anyone good. They didn't play any. They didn't have a super difficult schedule. Even though I know those in the SEC will be like, but they play in the SEC. It just means more. No, it doesn't. Stop it. Don't be an idiot. Texas A&M finally ran into some quality opponents and they lost, and that's okay. It happens. Michigan was an okay team, and then they ran into Ohio State, and it was like, oh, wow, we are not good. Yep. Certain teams are just better. You can sometimes you can just get on by with your first punch, but then to use that analogy again, then you run up into a team that you can't use that first that first punch, that first pitch, and you have to come up with something else, and you can't. I think Notre Dame was the same way. They played tomato cans all year, and every time they ran into a team that could actually match them physically, they lost. Plain and simple, they lost. Now, before we move on to the next game, we have to talk about the Miami defense. So A&M only had 89 rushing yards. A&M runs the ball. It's one of the key staples of their identity is they run the ball. Miami's defense has held 6 running quarterbacks under 60 yards rushing this year. I think the most they gave up to a running QB was 57 yards, and it was against Boston College or something, or SMU or whatever. It was much earlier in the season. That defense was nasty. They were everywhere. They were super physical in the trenches. They were disruptive in the pass rush. Their pass defense was rock solid. They didn't make any mistakes in the secondary. They were very physical. It was impressive. It's like, oh yeah, this DC, who I actually don't remember his name. Let me look him up for y'all real quick. Get out of that. And Miami Hurricanes DC. Corey Heatherman, that's his name. Yes, Corey Heatherman. Corey Heatherman was on the Penn State coaching staff, I think. No, pardon me. He coached with P.J. Fleck at Minnesota and then coached at James Madison. And he was poached from James Madison to coach Miami's defense this year. And their defense was... Miami won games in 2024 with, Cam Ward will figure it out. And that worked 8 times. But when you come up against a team that's physically equal to you, you can't just out-talent everybody. So their defense was not good last year. So they brought in Corey Heatherman, and that defense has had a massive turnaround in 2025. That Miami defense was really, really good. So look for Corey Heatherman to be a head coach in the near future. Taking a drink of water. All right. Next up, we had Ole Miss taking on Tulane in a rematch of a game that already freaking happened. Same with Ole Miss with Oklahoma versus Alabama, but this game, man, Ole Miss won 41-10. It was a blowout from the beginning. Ole Miss was in control. It was just a slow strangling that added up over time. Ole Miss QB Trinidad Chambliss finished the day 23 of 29 for 282 with a touchdown, 6 carries for 36 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. He had a good day. Kid's real good. He's one of these hidden gems that Kiffin found at the D2 level in the portal. He's good. I am unsure if he has any eligibility left, but I would not be surprised if he did have any eligibility left, if he didn't jump in the portal and go and play for Lane Kiffin at LSU, because Trinidad Chambliss has just been a star in Lane Kiffin's system, and part of me wonders if you don't want to follow that and get more of that special sauce. By contrast, Tulane quarterback Jake Retzlaff solid G5 QB. Finished the day 20 of 35 for 306 yards with a touchdown and a pick. He was solid. Unspectacular, but solid. He was just steady. He made some great throws. He had an interception that I thought was really bad. But this game was just boring. It was expected. It was like, wow, the thing we knew was going to happen happened. More at 11, you know? I mean, there's not much to say. I mean, Ole Miss was better in every way. And it showed in every way. The better team won. Shocking, I know. All right, moving on. Oregon took on the James Madison Dukes. Oregon won the game 51-34. And man, when I saw that score, I was like, holy crap, what year is it? Is this like the 2011 Pac-12? You know, is this 2012 Oregon, where defense was optional? The Ducks defense gave up 3 garbage time touchdowns, granted, but overall they gave up over 500 yards of offense to the Dukes, which I don't care how you try to frame that, is horrifying. The fact that James Madison, a team that got blasted by the only Power 4 team they played all year, the fact that James Madison team was able to go up and down the field in the second half and get yards, that's a concern if you're Oregon. Especially now that they go and play, I think they play Texas Tech from here. And that's going to be a much bigger, that's a much bigger task. Offensively, though, it was impressive. Oregon's passing game, Dante Moore, so impressive. Dante Moore finished 19 of 27 for 313 yards. He threw for 4 touchdowns, but he also threw 2 interceptions. He had 1 carry for 5 yards, and that play resulted in a touchdown on the ground. Dante Moore, he hadn't been on my radar all year because he's just kind of been there at Oregon, being solid, but not like, ooh, Heisman, you know? And I was impressed with his ball placement, the velocity of his throws, his accuracy. His mechanics and his footwork are a little but man, he throws an impressive ball. Now, part of me wonders if he can turn that into anything in the NFL. I don't know. But he throws a good deep ball. James Madison's quarterback, Alonzo Barnett III, finished 23 of 48 for 273 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also had 12 carries for 45 yards and a rushing touchdown. I thought Barnett played damn good. He was good, solid. He considering the mountain he had to climb, I thought his team played well in the second half. In the first half, they were just abysmal. It was like Oregon jumped down on them, and it was like 34-3 or something crazy like that, like instantly at halftime. But I thought, he did what he could. To be quite honest with you, I stopped watching this game in the middle of the third quarter because it was like 30-something to like 3 or whatever, and I was like, this is so boring. Oh my god. It would just... or it was like 40 something. I couldn't watch. I was like, I have better things to do than watch Oregon just spank James Madison. Now, admittedly, I guess as soon as I tuned out, the fireworks started on the James Madison offense. But for me, the real star of the game was Oregon wide receiver Malik Benson. Benson finished the day with 5 catches for 119 receiving yards, with 2 receiving touchdowns. He had a longest reception of 46 yards, and that wasn't a catch and run. He caught that baby in the end zone for a touchdown, and it was an absolute seed. Both of his touchdowns were like, wow, what a throw, what a catch. He's so good. He's so fast. Oh, my Lord. There were times where he'd get ahead of steam, and you'd see the defense going, wait a minute, where'd he go? He's just down the field, Super impressive. Now, like I said, they gave up like 500 yards of offense to James Madison. That's bad. And Um, Dan Lanning was understandably disappointed in the effort in his post-game presser. He didn't feel like he had just triumphed in a playoff game, if you know what I mean. But they're going to have to clean that up because James Madison is good, but they're not great. You know? No Power 4 wins all year, and they Oregon's defense was just bad in the second half. Just bad. Plain old bad. And so they got to, now that they're going to go play Texas Tech in the Orange Bowl, I think. Man, if their defense isn't fixed, they're going to get messed up. The thing about the first round of the playoffs is we have to have a conversation about the group of 5. So, which is funny because the group of 5 is technically 6 conferences. It really should be the group of 6, but everyone still calls it the G5. The G5 need their own playoff. They don't play the same game as the top dogs like Ohio State and Texas Tech and Oregon, Georgia. All of these S-tier, A-list teams, they don't play the same game that James Madison and Tulane play. It's a totally different world in the group of 5, and these teams deserve to have a playoff where they can excel, where they can play with teams that are at their level. Because as we're seeing, just because you're doing revenue sharing doesn't mean you're playing on the same footing as, Bama. You're not spending $40 million on your roster like Texas Tech is. You're just not. You don't have those kind of boosters. You don't have those kind of athletic department resources. So it's one of these things where the G5 need their own playoff. Now, if there's no stomach for that, then we need to have a second conversation about the college football playoff. Neither Tulane nor James Madison beat a P4 team this year. And yet they were both in the championship, in the playoffs, because they had conference championship wins. And I agree that should be important. But part of me thinks that it might be time for requirements for eligibility of G5 teams getting in the playoffs. Like, yeah, we're just, picking the best Power 4 teams, whatever. It's the same. That's the same criteria. But for G5 teams, there might need to be like a checklist. 10 wins. Did you get 10 wins? You did, cool. Check. Did you win your conference? You did, cool. Check. And here's the third one that I think is the most important. Did you beat a Power 4 team in your season? In your schedule, did you play and defeat a Power 4 opponent? Yes? Cool, you're eligible for the postseason. No? Sorry, you're not. Because teams, and if you don't want to go all the way to did you beat a Power 4 team, then change it to were you competitive? Were you like Boise State giving Oregon everything they could handle last year? Were you an actual team that showed that this team might actually match up against a Power 4 team if they get caught napping, That needs to be the bar, because oh my gosh, getting these teams in that are just not up to it and watching them get pantsed in front of God and everybody, not only is it unfair to the Power 4 teams, it's unfair to the G5 teams and the fans. Nobody wants that playoff game. Nobody wants Tulane versus Ole Miss. And yeah, people will say, but what about Cinderellas? You know what? Fine. Yeah, Cinderellas is awesome. Watching my alma mater, Oakland University, beat Kentucky in March Madness last year was the single greatest thing I've ever experienced as a fan of college athletics. I'm a Michigan fan. I saw Michigan win a national championship. I was at 3 Big Ten championship wins for Michigan. I was there. And I'm still telling you, watching Oakland University beat Kentucky was the greatest thing I've ever seen in college sports in my life. It was the most exhilarating experience of my life, and I wish every Cinderella team could experience that. At the same time, That isn't a thing in college football. It just doesn't happen. The teams that are in contention for a playoff spot are not the kind of team at the Power 4 level that gets caught out by a G5. It just isn't. It doesn't happen. Do you really think that a team like Indiana, as they're currently constructed, or Georgia, or Ohio State, would actually get caught napping and be sloppy enough and disorganized enough to give a team like Tulane or James Madison the runway to pull off an upset? Because for a team, people never see a group of 5 team. It isn't that they went blow for blow with, it isn't like Ohio State played Appalachian State or played Sam Houston, and they went blow for blow, and Sam Houston won 37-35. That's not what this is. If you see one of these teams, it's like, yeah, Ohio State's quarterback threw 3 interceptions, or they had 2 goal line fumbles, or yeah, Sam Houston had a punt return touchdown. They blocked a field goal, and they got 2 interceptions. They got 2 interceptions in the red zone. The teams that make the upsets are doing the most. They never go blow to blow with the superior opponent, because if they do, they get boat raced and they lose because you can't. If you're playing Ohio State and they're playing their game and you're playing your game, those 2 teams are not going to be even at the end of the game. No, it's going to be 51-10. So in college football, these group of 5 teams need to have their own playoff. And if not, then the only way they should be able to get into the playoff is if they check some serious boxes like Cincinnati did when they got into the 4-team playoff. Or Boise State last year, like, oh yeah, this is a real G5 team that might actually be a real opponent for a real playoff team. If you don't meet that bar, you shouldn't be in. Because at the end, and you know what? If you do meet that bar and you get spanked, fine. But at least they were a, quote, quality group of 5 team. But having teams like Tulane and James Madison in, who are clearly not up to it, and put on just awful playoff games, nobody wants this. Why do we do that? And you know what? It isn't even the blowouts. It's the fact that I'm watching Oregon. Yeah, Oregon gave up like 500 yards of offense, and they gave up 34 points. But in reality, if Oregon had been maximum effort in the second half, like they were in the first half, they would have won that game 70-0. Because they could do anything they want in the first half. If Dante Moore and Malik Benson kept doing just, oh, he's down there somewhere, oh, look, 40-yard touchdown, it would have been 65-3. But instead, they took their foot off the gas a little bit, and the Dukes kind of clawed back in a garbage time way, even though it was never actually in doubt. So, I'm just tired of it. I want to see quality matchups in the playoffs. That's the whole point of the playoff, is to get the best teams in the playoff so we can see who the best of the best actually is. And I'm sorry, guys, Tulane and James Madison are not the best of the best. But you know what they would be? They would be the best of the best of a G5 playoff. Like, are you telling me that this Tulane team and that James Madison team, if they were playing in the group of 5 playoffs, that would be a great matchup. Those 2 teams would be so evenly matched, and they'd have a great game. But instead, they got spanked in front of God and everybody because for some reason, that's how it had to be this year. I didn't like it. I thought it was the dumbest thing ever. So if you're not going to kick them out of the main playoff and give them their own playoff, you need to set like clear bar that like you have to pass over this bar. You got to be this tall to ride this ride. You know what? You got to be 51 inches tall. Whatever it is. You've got to do something, because we can't just keep welcoming in tomato cans to get stomped on by a team that's not even trying. It's bad. It's dumb. And it's a bad look. It makes the whole thing look like a farce. Like, oh man, it's 34-3 at halftime. What are we doing? We can't do that. So it's got to change. Will it change? No. Should it change? Yes. But it won't. All right, moving on. It is not going to be dilly-dilly time in Ann Arbor. Kenny Dillingham, the head coach of the Arizona State Sun Devils, signed an extension on Saturday. The extension is worth $7.5 million every year through the year 2030, but it can be which is a 5-year extension, but it can be a full 10-year extension if he meets certain incentives. Playoffs, conference champs, certain wins, whatever they end up being. We actually don't know what they are, but we do know that they're there. The bigger thing than the money is the fact that Arizona State has increased the total money pool for his assistants to $11 million. Now, what this tells me is Kenny Dillingham is devoted to Arizona State. So, he lives in Scottsdale. His family lives in Scottsdale or Tempe or they live, like his parents live down the road. He went to Arizona State as a student. He didn't play football for them, I don't think, but he went to Arizona State. And he's from the area, and he loves the school. And he was willing to take, $4 million less than he probably would have gotten at Michigan. And at the press conference where he announced his extension, he made a plea that if you're someone who can write a $20 million check to help Arizona State play competitive ball like Texas Tech and the rest of the Power Four, then they need to call him so he can make them famous. He was having to do an actual plea in the press conference, something he would never have to do at Michigan because you'd never have to ask those things publicly. Michigan has those guys, but Arizona State doesn't. So the fact that he's staying tells you all you need to know. I don't think he's ever going to leave until they either fire him or someone offers him like $20 million. Like money that's so obscene that he would be a fool not to take it. But I'm happy for Kenny Dillingham. I don't fault him for using the Michigan job opening to get some leverage, to get a better deal for his assistants and to get an extension. I guess this extension has been in the process for like the last month and a half or something like that. So I do not fault him for that at all. All right, Texas fired their defensive coordinator. They fired Pete Kwiatkowski. So Pete Kwiatkowski he came to Texas with Sark in 2021. Sark being Texas head coach Steve Sarkisian. He's had a top 30 scoring defense every year since he got there, but the Texas defense deteriorated in 2025 as the season went on. The team's defense surrendered 28.5 points per game in their last 6 games, as well as an average of 289 passing yards per game in that same span. So their defense just collapsed in output and just bad. Even though they were solid for several years and they were pretty solid early in the season, they just collapsed down the stretch. And it cost them some games, no doubt. So the insinuation is the fact that Steve Sarkisian was having to focus some of his time micromanaging the defense because he's the play caller on offense. He calls all the offensive plays. So when the defense was on the field, instead of being able to just turn around and talk to Arch Manning about certain things, he was having to have the headset on and monitor all the defensive snaps, which makes it hard for him to be the offensive mastermind as well. So Sarkisian wanted to hire someone who could be the, quote, head coach of the defense, end quote. And he ended up hiring Will Muschamp. So for those that name should sound familiar. Will Muschamp was Urban Meyer's defensive coordinator at Florida. He was Nick Saban's defensive coordinator at LSU. He was Mac Brown's defensive coordinator at Texas from 2008 to 2010. He was the former head coach of Florida. He was the head coach at South Carolina for a while. He's been there. He's done that. He's known for great defenses. He's not a great head coach, but he's known for great defenses. So I think this is a great hire for Texas because Muschamp, he has a physical, opportunistic defense that doesn't make a lot of mistakes and doesn't commit a lot of penalties. So that's kind of his forte. They're physical and they're very exacting. So I think he'll be able to just take over the defense and just, no worries, dude. No worries, coach. You can focus on the offense, and it'll allow Sark to focus more of his attention on the offense. I'll be honest, this was a shock. This wasn't on anyone's radar. Like, the Texas defense was supposedly pretty good this year. In hindsight, it wasn't when you really look into the stats, but everyone thought it was pretty solid. So everyone was like, why did they fire Pete Kwiatkowski? And then, Will Muschamp was hired, and we kind of learned why. But it was shocking when it happened. All right, the last thing we're going to talk about, let's do some quick hits. So Arch Manning has announced that he's going to take a pay cut at Texas for 2026. He's been making something like $3 million a year or whatever. So I guess he's taking a pay cut to allow Texas to divert some of his money to other players to help build him a championship roster, because he's coming back in 26 and he wants to win a championship. So this is the first time I can remember seeing an NIL player take less money like it's the NFL. Brady used to restructure his contract all the time to help the Patriots afford more players. So I think this is notable. I think you're going to see a lot more of this if you've got a guy who's like making a lot of money and he's on a team that could win a chip. You might see him like take a little bit of a pay cut to get that extra offensive lineman or that extra linebacker that's going to get the team over the top. All right, moving on. Michigan edge, senior, all Big Ten player Derek Moore is declaring for the NFL draft and will not be playing in the bowl game. So far, he is the only such Michigan player to do so. There is discussions about Marlon Klein, whether he's going to come back or he's going to go pro. Personally, I think he should come back because he had an up and down year, and I don't think he'll get drafted, to be honest with you, after the year he had, injuries, inconsistent play. But Derek Moore is going to the league, and I think he's going to be probably a second or a third round pick. He's kind of small for an edge, but he's got good speed. He's got good physicality. He's good at setting the edge. He's good in perimeter defense and all that. So, Godspeed, Mr. Moore. In other Michigan news, a lot of Michigan news. Michigan offensive coordinator Chip Lindsey has left the program to become the offensive coordinator for Missouri. Tight ends coach Steve Kasula will call plays for Michigan for the Citrus Bowl. I'm a little disappointed in this one, to be honest with you, but I understand. There's a high likelihood that a lot of the staff is going to get gutted when the new coach comes in. So, I would have liked to see him call plays at the bowl game just to see what the offense looked like without Sherrone Moore's influence in the building. But instead, I guess we're going to go see Steve Kasula in the bowl game for the second year in a row. But, we won that game last year, so maybe. On that note, so far, Texas has 20 opt-outs between, the NFL draft and the transfer portal. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of team Texas puts on the field on December 31st. All right, so next week I am going to be doing a full preview of the next round of college football playoff games, which will be in only a couple of days after the episode comes out. I will be doing a preview of the Michigan's bowl game, and obviously if there's any earth-shattering news, please have a Michigan head coach announcement that I can talk about next Monday. Oh my gosh, please. That would just be so much better than this waiting. Yeah, so that's the plan. Now, and as you notice, I didn't talk about the Michigan coaching deal today because there is no scuttlebutt. Everything we've seen so far has been lies. Total BS. So, malarkey. So, at this point, if I see something credible from, like, Pete Thamel or Brett McMurphy or someone who's an actual name, then yeah, maybe I'll talk about it. But until then, I'm going to just kind of follow along as a fan and just wait for this thing to go, because I think it might be a week and a half, 10 days, 2 weeks before we actually get any real closure on the subject. Either way, next week, playoff preview, Michigan bowl game preview. That's the plan. For those of you listening on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Prime, Amazon Music, and everywhere else that podcasts are available, thank you. Please consider leaving a like if you can, subscribe if you can, share the words. We can help the podcast grow. For those of you watching on YouTube, thank you. Please like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell icon so we can help reach more people, and so you can get notifications, feed the algorithm, leave a comment so we can reach more people and help the channel grow. hoping to get some more subscribers before the year's over. All right, my name is H. James K. Thank y'all for tuning in. Until next time.